Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about the natal chart of Aaron Rodgers. Now, many of you may have heard of Aaron Rodgers. He's a renowned NFL quarterback. He plays for the Green Bay Packers. He's been with them for some time. I believe he's played his entire career with them, and he's regarded by many as one of the best quarterbacks around, if not ever. So, I'm going to look at some things in his chart. Now, as far as just as basic as sun, moon, the three, what I consider the three main proponents in an astrological chart: the sun, moon, and his ascendant. His sun is in Sagittarius, moon in Scorpio, and he has a Taurus ascendant. Now, I think a lot of this, how this might pan out and manifest with him as far as this energy, how it's integrating. Well, starting out with the sun in Sagittarius, is the basic wants can be tied in, of course, to sports and athletics. Given that he has a Scorpio moon, a lot of this energy could be injected into crisis situations, being resilient, bouncing back. I've seen him play very well in the clutch, where he's been where his team has trailed. A lot of this energy is coming back from adversity, and the fact that Taurus is rising, it tells me that a lot of that energy could be flavored, could be done with a lot of calmness, a lot of composure. He's shown a lot of times where he's just downright unflappable. A lot of that, I believe, is attributed to Scorpio moon as well, because this Scorpio moon, of course, it could give him the ability to control his emotions. It doesn't mean his emotions can't be a little bit convoluted at times and very intense. And obviously, I'm sure it gives him a lot of willpower as well. And having a Scorpio moon in Taurus ascendant, I'm sure that modifies that mutable, that Sagittarius energy a little bit. He's probably not quite as easygoing as the typical Sun in Sagittarius person, though he does have a number of planets in Sagittarius in his chart. He does have a very strong Sagittarius influence. Now, what I noticed about his chart, one thing that stood out to me is that he has no planets on the left side of his chart. They're all concentrated, they're all on that right side. Now, the thing about this is, generally when people have a preponderance of planets on the right half of their chart, it's indicative of a person that may be a little bit more dependent on others, as opposed to being independent and self-reliant, and might need some cajoling from others more so than other people, need coaxing in order to get things done and get activities underway. But the thing about it is, so Aaron Rodgers, looking at this, I think a lot of it manifests with him just wanting to collaborate with others more on things, wanting to do things with others more. He has a Taurus ascendant. I think he's more than capable of being self-reliant and self-sufficient and doing things for himself on his own when it's necessary. But he likely likes to do a lot of things with others, and can strongly, and having in looking at his chart as well, having some Libra planets and some planets in the seventh house, he may strongly be about cooperation as well, and just doing things again with others. He's probably very strongly about competition, of course, given that he does have some planets in Libra and in the seventh house. So, in planets in the seventh house as well. Now, the thing about Aaron Rodgers as well, the fact that there's no planets in that as far as the quadrants go in his chart, he has most of his planets in that third quadrant. And the third quadrant of the chart, of course, consists of houses 7, 8, and 9. Because of that, a lot of his energy may be going into really just relationships and intimate connections, strong friendships, and maybe even people that are foreigners as well. It could be where he's more about, it could show a very strong concern for other people, and maybe even in contrast to himself, because he has no planets in that first quadrant, and it shows that he's likely somebody that's not overly egocentric or self-protective, or constantly dominated by his own needs and his own interests and engrossed in his own life. It shows that to me that he might be dominated a lot by activities connected with other people, and having that preponderance of those planets in that third quadrant, he could be very strongly about just the transformation of relationships, and also and maybe even expanding them as well, because the ninth house is expanded energy. Now he doesn't have any planets in the ninth house, but he does still have majority of those planets in that third quadrant in his natal chart. Now, another thing with Aaron Rodgers, I noticed that his chart ruler is in his sixth house of work and employment. So a lot of that Taurus, that plodding, laborious energy, persistent energy, can go into the daily routine, into his work, into his diet, anything that could be health related. And he could be somebody that may very well be a workaholic, had the fact that the chart ruler is in his sixth, and having the Taurus ascendant. Taurus ascendant can often go either way, as many of you may know. I have a Taurus ascendant. Taurus ascendant can either be, they could either be very industrious, very hardworking, or they may succumb to some kind of lethargy or stagnation. But he strikes me as somebody that's a very laborious worker, and he has won Super Bowl, and he has been and he's been in a number of postseason games. Now, the thing I noticed about his chart, what is interesting too, is that all these planets that he has are very confined in a very small small sphere. They're like within like around 90 degrees or something, and they're not, whatever it is, it's a very small sphere. It tells me though that he probably has a lot of concentration of energy and focus, and doesn't allow a lot of extraneous things to interfere with him. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the planets on the edges of this pattern are Mars and Neptune, which could give it more prominence, and that can make it more pronounced. The Mars in Libra could be very significant in terms of the energy and vitality into cooperation, collaborating with others, teamwork. And then you have the Neptune, that fulfillment, Neptune in Sagittarius, fulfillment of those sports dreams. He also has this interesting conjunction. He's got Neptune conjunct his Mercury in Sagittarius, and he has shown some ability to be somewhat prophetic. Many of you may remember it was around a few seasons ago when he made that semi-proclamation that the Green Bay Packers could reel off 6 consecutive wins to end the season, and that is what they did. I mean, energy, that strong Sagittarius energy in general can be, I think, somewhat prophetic and visionary. He has a lot of optimistic energy in him as well. He does have the majority of the planets above the horizon, and that strong Sagittarius influence, no doubt, is really about, especially that Mercury in Sagittarius, that mindset of being the incorrigible optimist. Now, a thing I noticed too, another conjunction which stood out to me, that Uranus, I believe, is right close to his sun in Sagittarius. I think that's where we see a lot of that, that non-conforming energy. It might have been some difficulty taking orders from the new boss that came in, I should say, the new head coach of the team. And I think too, Aaron Rodgers, though, with me, I think another thing that stands out in his chart is that he's got no planets in Earth. Now, the thing about it is, well, when you look at first glance at no planets in Earth, can sometimes indicators suggest a lack of pragmatism, practicality, financial acumen, lack of economical skill, or being able, or just understanding or conception of things of a monetary nature. But I think when you look at in lack of premeditation, but the fact that Aaron Rodgers has a Taurus ascendant and a Capricorn moon can certainly offset that to some degree. I mean, Taurus rising can really have very tremendous financial acumen, and I've noticed from Taurus rising people, they rarely go broke. I don't think he's that. I really don't. And considering where, I mean, even we could take astrology out of the equation, we understand Aaron Rodgers is very affluent and prosperous, I'm sure, right now, and will have money probably for the rest of his life. And Capricorn on the midheaven can show being astute and proficient at business as far as even a career and having a reputation and public image for that. It wouldn't surprise me at some point in time when Aaron Rodgers eventually retires from the NFL, he might be able to do something that could be business related. So, and thing about it is there was something else that I noticed. I mean, on a negative side, some of you may have remembered when Aaron Rodgers, there was something that came out in the newspapers, and I don't know if it was ever corroborated or not, or if it was ever confirmed 100%, but there was something where he hadn't talked to at least some of his family members for some time. And at that time, if I'm not mistaken, the transit Black Moon, Lilith in Scorpio, was close to his moon in Scorpio, which could indicate a revelation or unveiling. He didn't want to come out. That could be something. I mean, the moon being something family related, in secret of Scorpio especially, something he wanted to keep a mystery from others, and being, of course, the seventh house of others. There you go. I mean, with me, hold on a moment, people. But another thing I want to talk about, some transits that are currently happening or coming up in the near future for Aaron Rodgers. Now, the thing about it is he's got transit Uranus right now. I believe it's conjunct his natal ascendant and will be in the first house for a good part of, at least a good part of 2020. He's got to be careful at this time because, of course, the first house is the physical body. You're talking about Uranus and Taurus. It might be something very unexpected or unusual that might happen, like with either the vocal cords or the throat or the neck area. It could be even something just Uranus related, something with the nerves, the ankles, the shins. And he's also going to have transit Saturn in Aquarius for a very brief period in the year before it goes retrograde back to Capricorn later in the year. It'll be making, you could say, a long square to his natal ascendant in Saturn Capricorn. If you have it making an adverse aspect to your ascendant, sometimes it could suggest some issues that could be associated with the ankles or the shins or even the nerves. So those are some things, and even circulation. Those are some things he may encounter later in the year that could be somewhat injury related, but hopefully nothing will happen with Aaron Rodgers as far as that goes. And the thing about it is, and also too, he's going to have his North Node return. The nodal return will happen this year as well in Gemini. And he's got the North, and really, to me, what this is going to likely be about. I mean, North Node, he's got the North Node as far as natally, the North Node in Gemini. And the thing about it is, it shows for his future what he's supposed to focus on in that second, that word, the mission, the destiny, the purpose, and that second part of life is supposed to really be about manifold values and using cerebral ability to make money, using your quick-wittedness to do so, and really about the generating your own money through variety, through your cerebral ability. And of course, with the South Node in Sagittarius in the 8th, of course, that's going away from where maybe expansive help, maybe monetary help from others, or emotional support, could be philosophical support from others. And you're really, this is where, I mean, at this time, this is where something very significant could happen with him in terms of making money. Perhaps it could be where he might branch out and do something else. That could be I'm not saying he's going to stop being an NFL quarterback, but he may be doing something else in terms of some communication, and it might be even when maybe when the off season hits with the NFL, perhaps he does something where he does some kind of some kind of broadcasting or some kind of writing at this time to maybe make even additional money. Not that I don't think he's going to need it, but it could be another way where he may be generating some income. So it wouldn't surprise me if he does something like that around that, maybe during the off season of the NFL. Perhaps that could be something he could be looking at, because of course when your nodal return can be very significant. And the thing about it too is I noticed something else in his chart too, is that he seems like, Aaron Rodgers strikes me as somebody that's very crafty and very shrewd, in his thinking. And I notice first, I'm looking at his Mercury. Okay, his Mercury is in Sagittarius. It's in its detriment. But what he has is on his third house cusp, he has the Mercury. He has third house cusp in Gemini at 29 degrees, which I see as the full culmination of that sign. And what it is I think a lot of this plays a role, and when you see him being very shrewd, being very cunning, the ability, to outmaneuver the opposition. He's very, to me, he's definitely one of the more cerebral quarterbacks I have seen in some time. And of course, having a Taurus ascendant, he's probably more analytical, more articulate than maybe people would actually maybe see on that first impression. So, which of course is the ascendant. So anyway, people, that'll conclude. And again, I want to say is that what's interesting too is that his natal Mercury actually makes an opposition to the third house cusp. So it really shows that he might actually vacillate between two ways of thinking, is how I perceive it. Going from, the broad, Sagittarius Mercury can be about really being, speaking that veritable truth, being very, being very blunt. Mercury, and when you have a third house cusp at Gemini, it could be sometimes you may be more inclined to, when you communicate, to tell others maybe what they want to hear, as opposed to speaking that veritable truth. So it shows there might be a little bit of a conflict in that way of thinking. And Mercury and Sagittarius, of course, could be more about, communications more on a global level, and in talking with people maybe from foreign countries. Gemini in the third house cusp, of course, can be more about communications that are more local, like in your own area, your own neighborhood. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying, stay well.